So, there's a phrase by Machiavelli, which I think is fantastic. A wise man does it once what a fool does finally. I like it so much we put it on our merch. So go over to our store, shop.lotus.com, buy some, support us, help keep the lights on, right? Because obviously we've been demonetized, so we need your help. But I like this phrase. There are lots and lots of versions of it as well. It's not just Machiavelli who has come to this position, but I like Machiavelli because he's unfairly maligned as some sort of evil man, but in fact he was just a realistic patriot who was like, look, we have to be real about what's going on. And this could be applied to almost anything, but I think it's being learned that actually it also applies to multiculturalism. So it turns out there are lots of people who actually don't really approve of the West, and then they moved here. Now, that you might think is mildly counterintuitive, and so the wise man would have done at once what the fool eventually does. The wise man says, I'm not going to go somewhere I don't want to be. I'm going to stay where I am. The fool finally says, I don't think I want to stay here anymore. I'm going to leave. Because I've heard on very good authority that the UK is racist. It's insanely racist.
Very good authority, yeah.
Well, he's just the highest authority. We have others. But 100% definitely racist. Stormzy pointed out in 2019.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's like I say, going back, well, what would the wise man do if he was like, no, this is a racist country? Well, the wise man would take action on that.
Yes.
The fool will finally take action on that because necessity will force his hand. But, absolutely, definitely 100% racist. I mean, he literally complains about Boris Johnson using the word pickaninnies and watermelon smiles from his mansion. And so...
Because a man like that could never make it in this country.
Well, that's the point.
Yes.
Condemned to being a nobody at the bottom of society and never owning anything.
Yes.
Apart from a stab vest made by Banksy. But anyway, as Raven Smith here points out, which is a wonderful name, such a goth name, isn't it? Raven Smith. Goth English girl. Britain is racist. There, I said it. Good point. No one was saying it before. Thank God someone finally said it.
I've never heard anyone even make that allegation before today. So
apart from Stormzy.
Yes.
He made his allegation in 2019. Raven has made hers in 2021.
She picks up on it.
Yeah, she's no, in Vogue, I will write. Stormzy has a point. She does say, I wanted to soften the blow of this statement to maybe say that Britain has a problem with race or there's ongoing racial tension that needs our attention, or some people who like football also post racist tweets. Lots of those happen to be footballers, actually, as we're seeing now. But to shy away from that fact gets us nowhere. Britain is racist, and nobody in Britain wants to hear this. This seems to be Britain's biggest industry at this point. It's remarkable.
Exactly, yeah. Yes. They want to turn us into the United States, I think, don't they? With grifting and, these, skintellectuals and whatnot. Yeah.
She says, if I'm honest, I don't particularly want to say it. I'm trying to stay accountable for my own actions and privileges within systemic British racism. But this country that I love is also racist. I'm not anti-Britain. I'm anti the racist system it fosters. See, even the anti-racists are racists and love racist Britain. You've got to understand, like the racism in Britain.
Literally everywhere.
Yeah,
you breathe, look.
Yes. But even the people who are advocating against racism love racist Britain.
Yes, I had an egg mayonnaise sandwich at lunchtime and I had to stop halfway through and just think to myself, God, this is so racist.
You still ate it though, didn't you?
Well, I enjoyed it slightly better then.
So, and of course, all of our greatest heroes are racist. I mean, Winston Churchill, the man of the 20th century for Britain.
To be fair, he probably was.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the BBC's number one issue with him.
Yeah. But no less so than Clement Attlee would have been at the time.
That's true, but you're just trying to make excuses now, right?
I'm not making excuses. I'm picking him up.
No, everyone was like, no, that's a good point. Everyone was and still is racist.
Right. Okay.
This is what we are establishing from the BBC. Their number one problem with him is views on race. Of course, Winston Churchill's scholars will say something like, Churchill certainly believed in racial hierarchies and eugenics. In Churchill's view, white Protestant Christians were at the top above white Catholics, while Indians were higher than Africans, blah, 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 blah. He's got it all mapped out. It's like, right. Mildly problematic. I agree that Britain's literally greatest hero of the 20th century is a racist. Yep, good point. The civil servants, of course, know that everything is institutionally racist. A training video from the civil service, the Department of Leveling Up, so something created by Boris. It's not like this was instituted by Tony Blair or something, right? Said that white staff should be aware of their privilege and instead be allies of ethnic minorities, act as cheerleaders by standing up for ethnic minorities and shifting the spotlight to a person of color. The video on allyship has caused concerns, with one government source telling the paper that the civil servants were being brainwashed against racism. That's how racist they are. If you oppose racism in the civil service, you're being brainwashed against racism.
You have to wonder why the civil service is such a den of pure racism, don't you?
For the same reason the rest of the country is.
Oh, I see.
It's just congenitally racist.
Right, I see.
Right, you have to understand, Britain, racism equals identical. It's just the same.
Right.
And so this is why, as you can see, Stop Hate UK, not good. It's not good. 109,000 racially motivated hate crimes, according to the Home Office. Now, well, racially aggregated offences. So that doesn't mean violence, right? But what that does mean are people posting things online in 2021, 2022. So Home Office.
Oh, so these are tweets, are they?
The majority of them will be, yeah. But that is an increase.
Only 109,000.
That is an increase of 19%.
Right. Okay.
So, but the thing is, you got to remember, like, how many times do fish tweet about water, right?
Yes.
So you don't need to tweet about water if you're a fish.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Yes.
Swimming in it. So, but again, it's
so the absence of the racist tweets is proof therein that you are so racist that you don't even feel the need to make the racist point.
Exactly. It
Got
is
it.
embedded within us.
Yes.
It's literally in the DNA.
This is mainly Ron Think and thought crime and
Well-
other such heinous actions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. The anti-racists have got their work cut out for them, right? And of course, racism in Britain is a complicated issue. It's not just black and white, because of course we're racist against the Irish. We're racist against gypsy travelers. We're racist against, well, everyone.
It's a long list.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a genuine commitment, right? And so they say, we all know that we live in a racist society. Anyone who denies this is deluded and complicit with racism. So you were complicit with racism just earlier. We said, well, Clement Attlee is. Yeah, he was racist as well, as was Winston Churchill, as was every other British person up until this point. Correct.
Right.
You've got it.
Okay.
Right.
You're judging historical figures by today's standards. It's not gonna, you're gonna have these issues with any
But the thing is,
person from history or any country, any culture.
But the thing is, by today's standard, you're also a racist.
Right.
So-
Yeah, you can't win.
Oh, look, a racist is saying he's a racist. Okay. Any racial abuse against any individual is morally abhorrent, and civil society has a moral duty to oppose prejudice. We should try to get the number of people who experience racism as close to zero as we possibly can. Black Caribbean people, for instance, are more likely than Black African people to say they've experienced racism. Nearly 50% of Black Caribbean people, but 30% for Black African people. So this is, see, Winston Churchill's racial hierarchy still lives. Right? We are less racist to the Black Africans, but to the Black Caribbeans, even though, I'm not sure I could point them out of the lineup, somehow they're substantively different.
So when I lived in London, I did see occasional very overt racist slanging matches.
Really?
And they were always between Black Africans and Black Caribbeans.
Oh, really?
And they I can't remember, but they had a term. It's not the N word. It's like the Black Africans have a term for the Caribbeans, and the Caribbeans have a term for the African. I can't remember what it is now, but they get really nasty at each other sometimes.
You'll notice that the framing of this, 50% of Black Caribbean people have experienced racism. Didn't say from white people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Didn't say.
Right.
What it said is they just experienced racism. And I believe it because, of course, if everyone knows that Britain is a racist country, then surely the racists from Africa would come here. Hang on, I'm a racist. I want to go to a racist country. Look at the most racist country. Oh, look, it's Britain. Like, look at Winston Churchill. Their hero was a massive racist. So I've got to go to that country, right? Makes sense. Don't think it through too hard, right? And so when surveyed, the Brits will say, well, we're not racist. And in fact, this is a great list, right? So the Iranians are apparently the most openly racist. The Russians,
I can believe it.
Interesting list, that. Yeah.
Russians were 32% as self-avowed racists. Japan, 30% racist. China's only at 26%, which I find surprising. The Greeks are as racist as the Chinese.
More than 26% of Chinese people are racist.
Well, remember, of the selection bias, the racists from China are like, I need a more racist country. So they've come here.
I mean, you've travelled around Asia, haven't you, Justin?
Yes, quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, I've lived in Japan and South Korea.
Yeah.
And
in South Korea, they are just effortlessly racist.
Yeah, it's it's a funny list actually. I mean, a lot of those are quite homogenous. Obviously, the East Asian ones are, but Russia's quite high.
But let's keep going down. Right? So you can see there Nigeria at 13%.
Right.
France at 10%. There are 220 million Nigerians, which means there are probably about 30 million open racists in Nigeria. And so now suddenly, if the open racists in Nigeria are like, I need a racist country to move to, Nigeria is only 13% racist. Well, I've heard that Britain's really, really racist. And suddenly 50% of Black Caribbeans have been racially abused by unknown peoples. So I'm just saying that's a lot of racists. Like that's 3 times as many racists.
I don't think you're necessarily far off the mark here. Actually,
there are 3 times as many racists in Nigeria than there are Scottish people on the earth.
Oh, good God!
Right?
Good point. Yeah,
like self-avowed racists. France is 10%, which is impressive. I mean, they are beating us because we're only at 5%. Right?
It's sort of a shame there's not like
we need to do better. We need more
rookie numbers.
But it's sort of a shame there's
the
not
Nigerian
like
racists are like, I'm going to do my best.
Bring more of them in, mate.
If only there was some sort of annual World Cup of racism and each country could enter their own team.
I mean, look, this is all just really ridiculous. Being serious for a second, if the UK is as racist as these people make out, why do we get 1.2 million people want to come here? It's totally
racist.
Yeah, it's just totally counter intuitive, really. It's but they've got to really,
I mean, look at that. 9% of Canada and Australia are racist. That's another 10 million people or so. This is 8% of the United States are racist. There are a lot of racists out there, actually. Millions and millions of racists.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, we're on 5%. But the thing is, this, of course, is self-reporting, right?
Right.
And most British people swimming in racism don't even realize that they're racist. They're
right.
Oh, no, I'm not a racist. So actually, of course, this is going to be far, far higher. And so this leads Black people in the UK to be living in fear of racism, according to the UN. And if there's one thing I respect more than anything, it's an expert at the UN. Try to say that with a straight face. Black people in the UK are living in fear due to structural, institutional, and systemic racism, according to a UN working group. They don't mention the 30 million Nigerian racists that we let into the country. The expert who spent 10 days traveling across the UK, they've been here for 10 days, they know.
Oh, they're an expert, yeah.
They know. They have warned that people of African descent continue to encounter, again, African descent, not people from Africa, because we're
exactly
as many Nigerian racists as we can get in the country. Right? I mean, they're literally in the Conservative Party.
Yes,
literally going to save the country. But the people of African descent encounter racial discrimination and erosion of their fundamental right. It also highlighted trauma felt by people who are suffering racial discrimination, particularly in the criminal justice system. Dominic Day, a human rights expert for the group, said, what we found overwhelmingly was a culture of fear, a culture of denial, where the conversations about racism usually involve gaslighting and the delegitimization of very credible claims. So, I think we can all agree Britain is an irredeemably racist country. It attracts international racists, who I believe, although I don't have proof for this, make up the overwhelming bulk of the 1.2 million immigrants who come in. And there's only one thing to do.
Well, I mean, you convinced me that Britain is past saving.
Well, exactly. Britain is it's way past saving if you are a noble anti-racist.
Yes.
So the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. And so they leave. I took my children to the Caribbean to live free from British racism, and I've never looked back. Great point. Why wouldn't the wise lady in this case do exactly that?
Absolutely,
what would be the argument to not? I mean, 30 million Nigerian racists are on their way.
This needs promoting, this story.
Well, that's why I'm doing this segment, because I think she's making a great point. I mean, I think that's very clever. What is the possible objection? She says, my parents arrived from the UK to the UK from Grenada in the 1960s and did a pretty good job of making me the right kind of immigrant. She did well at school, attended universities, and was writing for national papers in her teens. Yet somewhere along the way, the wheels fell off. I became homeless after separating from my children's father. I returned to my parents' house, where I slept on the same blow-up camping mattress I'd used as a teenager trekking around Europe. I'd gone from writing for Rolling Stone and hanging out with rock stars to working minimum wage jobs and having to account for how many times I needed to pee during my shift. It's like, right, that's interesting. Rolling Stone have had cutbacks. But anyway, she says, as I hurtled towards my 40s as a single mother, relying on benefits to support my 3 kids, I did not feel like this was my life's assignment. And if I couldn't make it work in the UK, what chance did my children have in a country in which, on every indicator, from education to employment, health to housing, the odds of success as black citizens were clearly stacked against them? Exactly Stormzy's point.
I've got to say, if I was running the BBC, I'd be tempted to make like a Jamaican version of Neighbours that made it look fantastic and just have stories like this every single week.
This is a true story from her. This is her lived experience, and I take it as road. She says, so I made the decision to quit the UK, return to Grenada, the island my paternal and maternal grandparents left in the 1950s, before sending for their offspring a decade later. The irony did not escape me. My motivation was to raise my children in an environment where they could feel that freedom is their birthright. Because remember, Britain, the place of oppression, tyranny,
exactly,
anti-Magna Carta.
Grenada,
yes, an ex-slave colony, the place of liberty.
Well, I've never been, but I'm sure it's a complete utopia.
I don't doubt that it's beautiful. Right? I don't doubt that's amazing.
Former colony, isn't it?
Yes.
The empire. Yeah.
No. Sounds great. I think she's got the right idea.
So, this is very interesting description of Grenada, though.
Yes.
She says, so when they had to wait for the flight because of COVID, don't know why, the flights were still going. Maybe Grenada was like, okay, no flights. But Britain still brought in literally 1 million immigrants a year, 500 and 700,000 or something a year. Yeah. So our flights are still working because we're racist and we're trying to trap these people in our country. But Grenada was like, no, COVID. But when we finally arrived, I was filled with a feeling of overwhelming relief and joy that I didn't have to catch a flight back. Here, my 7 and 8-year-old girls get woken up by the neighbor's kids knocking on our front door. They go off exploring for hours on end, running in and out of the adjacent houses. Kids going missing isn't something we worry about on an island of 126,000 people. Remarkable.
Yeah.
In the UK, it felt unsafe for them to even go to the corner shop on their own, and whenever we visited our local park, we had to walk past a memorial to an 18-year-old who was stabbed to death in a road rage incident. It's something like a core memory for my girls before the age of 5.
Well, to be fair, there was a time when you could let your kids out in this country.
Well, I was going to say, us being of a relatively similar age.
Yes.
Well, yeah, it was exactly like that. But it's the racism that caused it to not be the way it is.
Yes.
And so she says, it has been reassuring to meet other black people in this process who are also in search of alternative ways of living. Together with collective families from across the globe, we are in the process of buying back part of the former estate in the rural north of the island. By forming a community land trust, we can live with others in alignment with nature and removed from the pressures of modernity at a fraction of the cost of living in the global north. That's a great advert.
Wonderful.
Send me a postcard.
Yeah, honestly, I'm tempted to go myself. I mean, Grenada's not racist, is it? Right? Yeah. I mean, if I go over there, I'm not going to be racially profiled because of my skin color, because I've been told that it's not. So, I mean, that sounds great. And I bet the weather's wonderful, right? Nice little island where everything's safe. Yeah. Get away from the pressures of modernity.
This article should be every TV advert for the next 10 years.
It hasn't all been plain sailing, though, because her 13-year-old son has decided to actually return to the racist UK to live with his father, right? He missed his friends and family, and he missed the fact that, having access to simple things like Thai food or consistently working cash machines.
Lavatories.
Has been difficult to adjust to. But does she miss the UK? No, not at all. In fact, when I return now, I wonder how I managed to live there for so long. Dystopian racist hellscape. Good for her.
Yeah. Well done, that lady.
Yeah, absolutely well done. And so this is becoming a bit of a trend that is called Blaxit, which is the black exit. Reasons you should live in Africa. Let's watch this.
Just a beautiful and encouraging experience. 2, safety. Many of the countries in Africa, I'm in Tanzania, are significantly safer than the United States when you check the rankings. And you never have to worry about any sort of racist anti-black violence against you. 3, challenging white supremacy. It is a game changer when you can show that it is possible to thrive in the world outside of westernized systems. 4, learning from African perspectives and experiences. So much of what we see, even those of us who call ourselves very pro-black, are still very westernized when we're from the Western world. When you move to Africa, you get to actually learn the indigenous ways of being from the continent. And 5, learning to love yourself as a Black person in deeper and more powerful ways. So much of what we get, again, living in the West, we're brainwashed to believe that Blackness is less than and that we have to fight to show and prove our value and worth. When you are in Africa, it is just evidence and it is just a normal part of living life. Amazing and peaceful to the spirit. Look, I acknowledge that it is not easy for everybody and the finances and all the details, logistics. Look, I know, I get it. But for those of you who are able to dream, to be able to build the game plan, figure out new ways of being, I encourage you, put it on your list to at least visit. Sense of
just keep thinking. Remember, the number one we kind of missed that is sense of belonging.
It is amazing being in a place where everybody looks like you.
I mean, that's his number one reason. Being in a place where everyone looks like you. Well, I guess you're not getting exposed to racism. And so you get things like this, where it's, more Black Brits see a better future away from Britain. It's like, yeah, they probably do. I mean, the British economy is crazy. It's insane how much the house prices cost. It's insane how little justice we actually find in this country. I mean, 95% of burglaries go uninvestigated. Yeah. But Britain is absolutely cratering at the moment. They're making great points. And Barbara Blake Hannah was born and raised in Jamaica, moved to England. She's like, look, what we need to do is essentially a kind of reverse Windrush generation. She literally says, let's do a Windrush in reverse and help make our paradise greater. And to be honest with you, I'm thinking about going with them myself. She's like, yeah, no, great point.
We'll tag along with them.
Yeah, we'll come with you now.
The way things are going.
Yeah, we'll do the reverse colonization in reverse. Is that how?
Yes, why not?
The song goes or the poem goes? Like we'll figure this out with you. I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, they are. If that's how they feel about the West, that chap in the video, presumably he's American.
He is.
And they're honest in their convictions. Then that's good for them. If they're finding solace and
have at it.
And
I mean, just great points made all round by everyone involved. I think. I hope they do well and Godspeed. Basically,
good news segment, Carl. Well done.
Thank you.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as Lads Hour, this episode on the $2 billion question. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.